Daf Yomi, tractate of Batra, page 38b, top of the page, with the words of Stam Yehuda Ugalil Shas Herim Damu. That an ordinary situation with regard to travel between Judea and the Galilee is tantamount to a period of crisis. Rav Yehuda says that Rav says one cannot establish the presumption of ownership with regard to the property of one who is fleeing, as he is unable to lodge a protest. Rav Yehuda reports, when I said this ruling before Shmuel, he disagreed and said to me, but does the owner actually have to protest in the presence of the possessor? Since that is not the case, and he can lodge a protest wherever he is, one can establish the presumption of ownership with regard to the property of one who is fleeing. The Gemara asks, and Rav, who ruled that one cannot establish the presumption of ownership with regard to the property of one who is fleeing, what is he teaching us? That protest that it lodged not in his presence is not a valid protest. But doesn't Rav say a protest that is lodged not in the presence is a valid protest? The Gemara answers, Rav is explaining the reason of the Tana of our Mishnah, but he himself does not hold accordingly. Okay. He himself does not hold accordingly. Rav holds in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda that the protest is valid. And there are those who say a different version of the previous discussion. Rabbi Yehuda says that Rav says one can establish the presumption of ownership with regard to the property of one who is fleeing. Rabbi Yehuda reports, when I said this ruling before Shmuel, he said to me, isn't that obvious? But doesn't the owner actually have to protest in the presence of the possessor? The Gemara asks, and Rav, who ruled that one can establish the presumption of ownership with regard to the property of one who is fleeing, what is he teaching us? That a protest that is lodged not in his presence is a valid protest? But Rav already said this halacha one time, and he would need to repeat it. He would not need to repeat it. Rather, Rav teaches us this, that even if the owner protested in the presence of two witnesses who were personally unable to tell the possessor about the protest, it is nevertheless a valid protest. Okay. The Gemara explains, as Rav Anan said, this was explained to me personally by Shmuel himself. If the owner protested in the presence of two people who were unable to personally tell the possessor if it is a valid interest, but the owner protested in the presence of two people who are unable to personally tell the possessor it is not a valid protest. And why does Rav hold that it is a valid protest? Because your friend who heard the protest has a friend to whom he tells about the project, and your friend's friend has a friend to whom he tells about the protest, and so forth. Therefore, the word of the protest will reach the possessor. Rava says the halacha is that one cannot establish the presumption of ownership with regard to the property of one who is fleeing, and a protest that is lodged not in the possessor's presence is a valid protest. The Gemara asks, how can he say these two statements that contradict each other? The Gemara answers, this is not difficult. Here, the second statement is referring to a case where he is fleeing due to monetary difficulties. In such a case, he is able to ensure that the protest reaches the possessor, while their first statement is referring to a case where he is fleeing due to a charge of killing. In such a case, he is unable to publicize his protest out of the fear of revealing to his whereabouts. The Gemara presents a series of disputes with regard to what is considered a valid protest. What manner of statement constitutes statement constitutes a protest? It said, if the owner says in general terms, so and so is a handler, and it is not a valid protest. But if he says so and so is a robber, as he is holding my hand through the robbery,